I love the intent, and I love the fact that, it's going to attract people from, other forms of racing, but I don't like the fact that it left out our own.
His words land with force, a direct shot at NASCAR's latest rule change, the open exemption provisional rule. For a driver who spent decades in the sport, watching it evolve, this latest decision stings. Kevin Harvick's frustration is palpable. It's a rare moment of vulnerability from a seasoned driver who's seen it all. His words are loaded with meaning, but they are also a window into a larger issue brewing within the sport of NASCAR. NASCAR recently introduced the OEP rule, designed to give top-tier drivers from other motorsports an automatic entry into select Cup Series events. The idea? To elevate NASCAR's prestige by inviting international talent. But in doing so, the rule sidelines some of the sport's very own legends, former champions like Harvick himself. The rule was meant to attract fresh international faces to NASCAR. But for Harvick and others, the question arises, what about the drivers who built this sport? What about the veterans who have carried NASCAR's legacy through its highs and lows? We've gone back and we've figured all these things out with all the guys that kind of had a bad taste in their mouth with how they've been treated the last couple of years, Harvick adds. His tone makes it clear he sees this as yet another example of NASCAR overlooking its veterans. Harvick's frustration is not just about a rule, it's about respect. A respect for the drivers who have paved the way and for the legacy they've created in NASCAR. And that brings us to the bigger issue. Does NASCAR's pursuit of global expansion mean abandoning the very foundation that made the sport what it is today? As we dive into this debate, we'll explore the intent behind the rule, Harvick's pointed criticism, and the larger question it raises. Should NASCAR prioritize expanding its reach, or should it stay loyal to the champions who made it what it is today? I love the intent, but I don't like the fact that it left out our own. This was Kevin Harvick's immediate reaction when NASCAR announced its open exemption provisional rule. To understand the weight of his criticism, we must first appreciate the broader context. The OEP rule was designed to grant international motorsport stars an automatic entry into the prestigious NASCAR Cup Series events, such as the Daytona 500 and the Coca-Cola 600. The idea behind the rule is simple: attract top-tier international drivers to NASCAR, elevating the sport's visibility and global presence. But it didn't take long for Harvick and others in the NASCAR community to point out a glaring oversight. It's a rule that says, hey, we're going to take a driver who's not a part of our sport, not a part of our history, and they're going to come in and get a free pass into our sport. Harvick explained in his podcast, his voice tinged with disbelief. Harvick's frustration is rooted in his belief that NASCAR should prioritize its own history and legacy. He argues that the sport is neglecting its roots, those very roots that have been built over decades by loyal, dedicated drivers. For Harvick, the OEP rule feels like a slap in the face to NASCAR veterans. By focusing on bringing in outside talent, NASCAR is disregarding the contributions of drivers who have helped the sport grow and flourish. I'm all for bringing in new talent from different places, but not at the expense of our own drivers who have earned their place, Harvick added. The issue, according to him, is the unfairness of the rule. It's not about welcoming outside drivers, it's about honoring those who have spent years climbing the ranks and earning their spots in NASCAR. For veteran drivers like Harvick, there's a sense of betrayal. They've seen the sport's rules evolve over time, often in ways that seem to favor newcomers or international drivers rather than those who have dedicated their careers to NASCAR. In Harvick's eyes, the OEP rule is yet another example of this trend. While Harvick's perspective is clear, NASCAR's justification for the OEP rule is rooted in the need to expand and modernize the sport. The goal is to bring more attention to NASCAR by featuring top-tier international talent, NASCAR President Steve Phelps stated in a press release. This rule opens up new opportunities for the sport, and it helps us achieve our goal of becoming a more global brand. NASCAR's vision for the future of the sport is focused on growth. The organization wants to capture a global audience, and to do so, it believes it needs to attract the best drivers from around the world, especially from disciplines like Formula One and IndyCar. The OEP rule allows international drivers who may not have the experience or fan base in NASCAR an easier path into high-profile races. But Harvick isn't convinced that this approach is the right one. If we're going to go this route, we need to make sure we're not forgetting the people who built this sport, Harvick argues. From his perspective, the OEP rule represents a worrying shift in NASCAR's priorities, away from respecting the champions of the past and toward catering to global expansion. The OEP rule isn't the first time NASCAR has been criticized for its perceived neglect of veterans in favor of outsiders. Over the past few years, NASCAR has introduced several changes to its schedule, including international races and events targeting new markets. While these moves have been aimed at increasing the sport's popularity, they have left many longtime fans and drivers wondering, who's being left behind in the pursuit of a broader, more global NASCAR brand? Harvick's criticism highlights a growing divide in the sport, a tension between nostalgia for the past and the drive to modernize. Veterans like Harvick are caught between honoring the sport's history and navigating the demands of a new, globalized NASCAR. The issue, however, is deeper than just a few rule changes. It's not just about me, Harvick said, reflecting on the broader implications of the OEP rule. There are so many drivers who have spent their entire careers working hard to earn a seat at the table. And now, it feels like we're being pushed aside for people who have never even competed in a NASCAR event. For veteran drivers, the fear is that the OEP rule will create a two-tier system. International drivers, who may only compete in select races, will have an easier time securing coveted spots in the Cup Series, while longtime NASCAR drivers will have to continue fighting for their positions, despite their years of service to the sport. It's not just about winning races, it's about the legacy these drivers leave behind. NASCAR has long prided itself on its history, with many of the sport's greatest moments and fiercest rivalries involving drivers who have been with the series for decades. The introduction of the OEP rule in many ways undermines that legacy. It tells veterans that their place in the sport is no longer guaranteed, no matter how many victories they've earned. This is a slap in the face to anyone who's ever worked hard to get a spot in this sport, Harvick added. His words, while passionate, reflect a wider frustration shared by many of his peers. NASCAR has built its identity on the backs of drivers like Harvick, Dale Earnhardt Jr., and Jeff Gordon, names that resonate with fans and have defined the sport for years. If the OEP rule succeeds, those names could soon be overshadowed by international stars who haven't earned the same level of respect or recognition within NASCAR. The OEP rule also raises questions about NASCAR's commitment to its existing fan base. There's a huge base of NASCAR fans who have supported the sport for years, Harvick pointed out. If NASCAR continues down this path, it risks losing the people who have made it what it is today. Interestingly, NASCAR isn't the only sport grappling with the tension between tradition and globalization. In other major leagues, such as the NBA and NFL, foreign players have become an essential part of the game. However, in those sports, the integration of international stars didn't come at the expense of homegrown talent. These leagues have carefully balanced the inclusion of new talent with the preservation of their traditional rosters. In comparison, NASCAR's OEP rule feels more exclusionary. While it does open the door for international drivers, it does so in a way that leaves veteran drivers, who are key to the sport's legacy, on the outside looking in. Harvick's critique of the OEP rule is, at its core, a defense of NASCAR's history and its loyal drivers. For him, the sport isn't just about racing, it's about the community that has supported it for decades. That's why Harvick feels so strongly that the OEP rule is flawed. It creates a divide between the past and the future of NASCAR, leaving many to wonder, can the sport really grow without sacrificing the very foundation that made it great? As Kevin Harvick continues to speak out against the OEP rule, his frustration grows from concern to a call for action. This is bigger than just the OEP rule, he explained in a recent interview. This is about the direction NASCAR is heading and whether they're willing to respect the very people who made it the powerhouse it is today. Harvick's concerns don't end with a single rule change, they reflect a larger anxiety about the future of NASCAR itself. As the sport evolves, veteran drivers fear they may become sidelined in favor of foreign drivers, often at the expense of the history and fan base that built the sport from the ground up. We've earned our place in this sport. It's time for NASCAR to recognize that, Harvick added, calling for greater recognition of the veterans who continue to compete at the highest level. The future of NASCAR, as Harvick sees it, hinges on how well the sport can balance growth with respect for tradition. Expanding the sport globally is important, but it should not come at the cost of the core values and the drivers who have helped shape it. The question now stands: will NASCAR take Harvick's concerns to heart, or will they continue to focus on expansion at the expense of their own veterans? As NASCAR faces a crossroads, it's clear that the opinions of longtime drivers like Harvick must be part of the conversation. But will they be? What do you think? Will the OEP rule change the sport for better or worse? Is it time for NASCAR to rethink its priorities and respect the champions of the past, or should they continue down the path of global expansion? Let us know in the comments.